Hi, everybody. This is the second day of the Color of Fandom VCon, and we are very, very happy to have Milton Davis with us today. We're going to talk to him about his writing, also his publishing, his company, and all of the things that we just love about getting to know him and read him. So thank you very much, Milton Davis, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen because I do have a PowerPoint. I don't know, we've had some technical difficulties, but I think y'all might be able to see this.
I can see it.
Okay, good. Okay, and so what I'll do, I would like to read, I'm just going to read this biography just so people can get to know you. Milton Davis is an award-winning Black speculative fiction writer and owner of MV Media, LLC, a publishing company specializing in science fiction and fantasy based on African diaspora history, culture, and traditions. Milton is the author of 19 novels and short story collections. His most recent, The Sword and Soul Adventure, A Debt to Pay. We're going to talk a lot about Sword and Soul, by the way. Milton is also a contributing author to the upcoming Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, published by Marvel and Titan Books, and co-author of Hadithi and the State of Black Speculative Fiction with Eugene Bacon. He is the editor and co-editor of 8 anthologies: The City, Dark Universe, and Dark Universe, The Bright Empire with Gene Peterson, Griot's The Sword and Soul Anthology, and Griot's Sisters of the Spear with Charles R. Saunders, and Kikanga Anthology, the Steampunk Anthology, and the Diesel Funk Anthology with Balogun Ohedade. Did I say his last name right?
Balogun Ohedade.
Ohedade. Okay. Yeah. Milton's work has also been featured in Black Power, the Superhero Anthology, and Rokakoa, published by Roaring Lions Productions, Skelos 2, the Journal of Weird Fiction and Dark Fantasy, Steampunk Writers Around the World, published by Luna Press, Heroica, Dragon Eaters, published by First Perseid Press, and Bass Reeves Frontier Marshall Volume 2. Milton Davis and Balogun Ohedade won the 2014 Urban Action Showcase Award for Best Script. Milton's story, The Swarm, was nominated for the 2018 British Science Fiction Association Award for Short Fiction. That's awesome. And so I do want to talk about, I'm actually going to go back a little bit because one of the things that I really like about your work is your world building and the fact that you bring authors together in world building. I have several of your anthologies as well as your own novels. And so I really would like to touch on your feelings about those, working with other authors, having a vision, and having MV Media bring all of these people together. So I do have your genres. It seems like you focus a lot on, and I didn't put diesel funk. I didn't think about that. So I actually could put steampunk, diesel funk a little bit together. Cyberpunk and Sword and Soul. Those seem to be the genres. Now, obviously, things like Terminus I don't know if Terminus necessarily falls into any of these, but you have other works that don't always fall into these, but these seem to be some very strong genres in your work. And so I would like, if you could explain to the audience what steampunk and cyberpunk and Sword and Soul are.
Well, one of the things that when I started writing, like most authors that are Black speculative fiction authors who started writing independently, a lot of us did it because we didn't see representation in the industry. And, we read science fiction, we love science fiction, the different aspects of it, but we never saw ourselves represented. So it was a matter of saying, let's be the change that we want to see, basically. That's what it comes down to. And all of these genres are kind of like examples of doing that. The first one I really got involved with was Sword and Soul, because I really loved sword and sorcery. And I wanted to see sword and sorcery stories with Black characters in it. And that came off of my research I had been doing for years and years on African history. And so I wanted to write these stories and express what I learned over the years in these fictional stories. And so the first books I wrote, Meji and Changa Safari, these were both stories that were like sword and soul stories. And right after I started writing it, I met Charles Saunders and found out that Charles had been doing this stuff back in the 70s and doing it very well. And we met through a mutual friend. And once we met and we started, and it's like we came up with the same thing separately. He came up with it like 30 years before I did. You know, and to be honest, sometimes I wonder if I had read his stuff before I started writing my stuff, if I would have ever written my stuff. Because I would have been like, okay, if somebody did it, good, I'm good with that, you know, that kind of thing. But we started talking, and you know, we call each other sword and soul brothers. And the anthologies came out of the fact of us thinking about other people who had probably done the same thing or wanted to do the same thing, but didn't have the outlets to do it. And that's where Griots came from. We said, let's put the call out, say, hey, we're going to be doing this anthology of sword and soul stories, you know, send us what you got. And just like we suspected, there were people who had written stories and had them rejected, people who wanted to do it, and people who were thinking about doing it, and put together a great collection of stories, great artwork. A lot of the authors that contributed to the anthology are like some of the major or up and coming Black speculative fiction authors that you're seeing today. So, I mean, Maurice Broaddus is in there, Minister Faust is in there, Fenderson Jelly Clark is in there, Valjean Jeffers is in there, Carol McDonald is in there. You know, it's just almost like a who's who of Black speculative fiction authors, and even artists. Actually, Jeffrey Thorne is in there. He's doing a lot of work with Marvel now. John Jennings has artwork in there. Stacey Robinson has artwork in there. So it's kind of like a foreshadowing of what we're seeing right now. And steampunk and cyberpunk came from that same energy. You know, steampunk, we were having a conversation about the lack of diversity in steampunk. And Balagoon and I were talking about it. We got into a conversation with other authors. And so we did the same thing. We said, hey, let's not talk about it. Let's do something about it. And that's where that anthology came from, you know. And it was actually the first anthology that approached the steampunk genre from a non-European aspect. And not too long after we released that anthology, there were a slew of anthologies that came out that were looking at steampunk from different perspectives. It's almost like people were waiting on permission to do it. and once it was done, they were like, hey, you know, we can do this too. And so it just kind of like came out, this whole energy came out from the whole thing and stuff, you know. And once again, cyberpunk is the same thing. Looking at the cyberpunk genre, looking at the work that's been done. I've always loved cyberpunk, but was intimidated because when I saw the stuff that from Ghost in the Shell, I felt like every aspect of cyberpunk you could possibly think of had already been done, and there was nothing I could contribute to this genre whatsoever. So I was like, there's no even reason for me to write this stuff. But the stories started coming, and I said, hey, I got to start writing this stuff. And then again, started thinking about other authors and stuff. So that's where this anthology is coming from, which is going to be dropping in March of this year.
Oh, good, because I loved Dark City, the City. I love the City. So, and we'll talk about it a little bit later when we do it. But I'm ready for some more because that's my genre right there, cyberpunk. So
yeah, the City was a fun anthology. We had a good time doing that anthology.
That was so awesome. So your Sword and Soul title. So I just pulled a few books. I mean, I know you have plenty more. And actually, Kikanga, we got, because we were going to actually play it. How do you go about the world building with the sword and soul, because I know that is such a major part of your writing collectively and your writing, by yourself. And so how do you go about the world building with this?
Well, when it comes to world building, I basically cheat like most other authors do. When I first got into Conan, I was reading Conan stories. I was like, man, Robert E. Howard is creating these amazing worlds. And then I started doing some research on the Celts. And I'm reading this book about Celts, and I'm starting to see all these names that Robert E. Howard was using in Conan. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So found out that basically Robert E. Howard was I think he was an anthropology major, something like that. So a lot of the work that he was doing was based on research that he had done in history. And so Sword and Soul kind of comes from that same energy. Charles did the same thing, looking at African cultures, things that they had that was specific about the different cultures, and things that were kind of like universal about African cultures in general, and taking all that stuff and putting it together and building different worlds. The first world I built was for Meji, and Meji was kind of like a doppelganger of Africa, I guess you can say. Every culture in Meji is based on a specific African culture or a composite of African cultures that were in the same region. I got so detailed with it where if I say, for instance, if you read the book, you probably know about Ndoro and the Sesu. The Sesu were directly based on the Zulu. So all the names that I use for people from the Sesu are Zulu names. The Moena were based on the Ashanti. And so all the names that I use for the Moena people are from the Ashanti culture. And so that's basically where my world building comes from. In Kikanga, Kikanga was kind of done the same way. We were building a world for a role-playing game. Mm-hmm. So we had to build, but we had to get more detailed than that. Not only did we have to build the countries and the cultures, we had to come up with the creatures, the herbs, the weapons, and it's a much more detailed thing. And to be honest, if it wasn't for Balogun, that wouldn't have happened because he's a 40-year RPG player. And also I have to mention Ed Hall as well, because Ed Hall actually used to work for White Wolf and some of the other RPG companies. And we met him by chance, and he was an editor for these companies and developed some really good games for them. So as we started to put the world together, he kind of, he was basically checking our process, making sure that we were doing things the right way, and it was conforming the way RPG games are created in general. So, So in each situation, it's kind of like taking an existing culture and existing cultures and picking and choosing what you think will work for your world. I think the furthest I got away from basically basing on particular cultures is my latest book, A Debt to Pay, where I basically take Sword and Soul and alternate history and steampunk and just put it all together in this, unique world. And if you, it's basically based on the scenario as what if African cultures and European cultures both came to Europe on their own and ended up being defeated by Native Americans and ended up existing in a world that's basically still dominated by Native Americans.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to read that. Yeah.
So that's the whole world that this story takes place in. So I guess that's what it is. Just taking what you know and then throwing a little imagination in there and stirring it up and see what comes out.
How long does it take you to do this? So because this sounds like, a lot of work. Even though you're picking and choosing, you're still having to do the research. So time-wise, how much, I guess when you think of it percentage-wise, how much of the writing process is the research?
It depends on the project. If I do a Sword and Soul project now, it doesn't take me long to do it because I started doing the research back in the 90s. You see this bookshelf behind me. Mm-hmm. Most of this stuff is like history books that I've been reading over the years. If I get into something that's new, then it may take me a few months to do some research to get my foundation together. And then you're still doing research as you're writing the stories, because sometimes you'll get to something that you really don't know a lot about. So that's when Google becomes your friend.
Yes.
You can look stuff up easily and kind of confirm some of the stuff you're doing or get more information on it. You have to kind of be careful because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
I'm always picking up paperback books all the time because I really love history. History is really my thing. That's if anything, I'm a history nerd. So I'm always picking up history books and stuff like that. And that information always finds its way into my fiction some kind of way. But I think that's what it really comes down to, is just the constant research. And again, it depends on what I'm writing about and if it's something brand new or if it's something that's based on something I've been doing for a while.
Okay. Okay, so some steampunk. Steampunk is, I mean, in terms of cosplay, steampunk is my favorite.
Yeah.
And I see, and steampunk is a major, area that you write into. What really drew you to steampunk? What is it about steampunk that you really like?
The thing that I like the most about the steampunk and steampunk genre is the alternate history. I've always been a big alternate history fan. But I also noticed, like every other genre, you got certain tropes that come up all the time. And in steampunk or in alternate history, it was either the Civil War never ended or the Nazis won World War II,
Yeah.
Like, every time you see it. And the one thing that was always constant in these stories were like, okay, Africans were going to be slaves.
Yeah.
That's always constant, that was going to be there. But my thing was, let's think about it from another perspective. When I first started doing Fredonia and From Here to Timbuktu, that I started working on that before I met Balagoon. And when I showed it to Balagoon, he said, Milt, this is steampunk. And I'm like, no, it's alternate history. He said, no, it's steampunk. I said, no, it's alternate history. So I looked at it and I was like, well, no, this might be steampunk, but again, I wanted to, for me, it's really important to name what you do, because as African Americans and people of African descent, we've always had other people describing and defining what we do. So I felt like it's very important for us to do it, to reflect what we feel and what we think about what we do. And that's where Sword and Soul comes from. And that's where steampunk comes from. And so to play in these worlds, and every one of my steampunk worlds are alternate history worlds, it's just gives me the opportunity to do what if scenarios. Like Fredonia is based on what if the Haitian Revolution spread from Haiti to the southeastern United States and was successful, and that's where that whole history, that whole genre came from. The Long Walk is actually based on a different steampunk line that Balagoon and I worked on. We actually made a movie a few years ago based on this scenario where people like Harriet Tubman and these other characters are like superheroes basically, and telling the story about them and stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about steampunk, just like you're saying, the idea of alternate history. And you are so right. People don't do stories where maybe Africa conquers or colonizes the world, or there isn't slavery, or things like there's always that I guess white supremacy that seems to always permeate in all of these stories. But I love it now with steampunk. You can see what I would love to see in alternate history, And
sometimes it doesn't even have to be about the history, because Jingle Jangle is a big example of that. I don't know if you've seen Jingle Jangle yet. I saw that movie and I was blown away, because I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. I mean, it was basically a story about a family, but the fact that they incorporated African patterns into the costumes and everything that they did, I was like, man, I said, see, this is what I'm talking about right here. I mean, that's my favorite movie right now. I mean,
it's like it can be, bringing in the diversity, bringing in, for us to see people who look like us is so important, and it doesn't have to be a story that is rooted in race. Just as long as we can just see ourselves in it. So, I appreciate that. Now, cyberpunk, and I love steampunk when it comes to cosplay. I love cyberpunk when it comes to reading. So, Dark Universe and the City. I have not read The Bright Empire yet, um,
Okay.
but I'm getting ready to as soon as I finish this interview. But the City, I thought was awesome. One of the things about the City was that it also had music attached to it. It seemed like there was also a soundtrack that was attached to it. And I thought that was such a unique thing to do with an anthology. How did that idea come about? And what do you how did your ideas about your books in cyberpunk come about?
Well, the city was probably one of the coolest projects as far as how it began to me, because it was like we were all on this was it Black Science Fiction Society at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I threw out this phrase and I put a picture to it, and that's basically how it started, and it's in the intro of the book. And then other authors read that, and then they started throwing out these little vignettes and putting pictures with it, and it just kept going and going. And then the music actually came from Otis Galloway, because this musician, DJ, he started reading the snippets and he got inspired. So then he started doing these little soundtracks to each of the stories. And at some point, I just said, look, y'all, this has got to be an anthology. We got to do this. It's just going so well. So basically, it's the same thing. Everybody that wants to, that's been putting up the vignettes, write stories, send them in, and they're all based on this central scenario of this city that may or may not be alive, basically, and that's where it came from. I mean, it's probably one of the most spontaneous projects I've ever worked on, and I kind of call it it's like literary jazz.
Yeah.
When I was listening to how when Miles Davis came up with one of his songs, he just came up with this basic track, and he said, this is going to be the backbeat, and the musicians just come in and play what you're going to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember the name of the song, and I ought to be ashamed of myself for not, but they said it was probably one of the first songs that was like totally improvisation.
Okay.
And when I think about the city, I think about the same thing, because it's like we just laid this track and said, okay, y'all just come in and bring your flavor to it, and people just did, and it just came out so well that from that aspect and stuff. So it's one of the projects I'm really excited about. Dark Universe was a little bit more planned out, because we wanted to create a scenario for a Afrocentric space opera.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it came from. Gene and I talked about it, and so we came up with the world, and we invited specific authors that we knew were science fiction authors, Black science fiction authors, and we felt like would bring that kind of energy to it. And we gave them scenario, and then each of them just kind of wrote their stories in that. And the book is supposed to be like a chronicle of this Afrocentric galactic empire from beginning to its demise, covering over 1,000 years. And as we were doing it, one of the authors, Penelope Flynn, said, we got this empire we just created, and all we're doing is talking about how it began and ended. We should spend some time talking about the empire. And that's where Dark Universe, The Bright Empire came from.
Okay.
That's basically a collection of stories about the Kassad Empire at its height, and talking about the people and the experiences of living in that empire and stuff like that. So it's actually going to be a probably at least a 4-book series. We got a couple of more in the process, because we want to just kind of tell this whole history in detail. But again, it's another fun situation of getting together with authors and coming up with some cool stuff.
I mean, I enjoyed both books because I have Dark Universe and The City. In fact, I tapped Gene Peterson because I was thinking about, this is when I was in virtual reality a lot, and I was thinking it would be cool to have a virtual reality city, the way it was described in the book. But it's just so detailed and so rich in the book. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I'm not an author, but I just thought both anthologies were just so awesome. So I'm looking forward to reading The Bright Empire.
Don't give up on that VR thought.
I won't. I mean, I'm going to still, I just think it would be so cool. So I would love for all of us to work together to have that. We'll see how that goes.
That'd be cool right there.
Yeah, that'd be real cool. So I have some of your other novels, and like I said before, obviously you have written a lot. So I just put a few on this PowerPoint. But Amber and the Hidden City, I know there's a new Amber.
Yeah.
There's another Amber book. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, Amber was like a response to readers. Every time I did a con, I would have parents come to me and ask me, what did I have for younger people? And I didn't have anything. That's not where my focus was as an author. And at the time, my wife was still teaching. She was teaching 3rd grade. And she was like, well, you really should write something for younger kids and stuff like that. And this went on for like a few years because I just wasn't, when I write something, I want to make sure it's something that I'm passionate about. And I just wasn't in that mindset. And then after a while, I kind of came up with that idea, that story. And I said, okay, now I can write something. And that's basically where Amber came from. In African, and I wanted, it's an African-American girl who discovers that she has magical powers, and she is the chosen person to select the next ruler of this magical African empire that's been hidden from the rest of the world for 1,000 years, where her grandmother's from. And so when I went into this story, I wanted a couple of things. I didn't want to do that normal trope where the child's parents have died and they're living with the evil uncle, aunt, ward or whatever, and all that kind of stuff like that. Amber's a well-adjusted African-American girl that grows up in a middle-class neighborhood, that kind of thing. So it's, it took a little different tack, and it's something that was closer to me, because this is kind of my own experiences and stuff. And I will have to say that the character of Amber herself was influenced a lot by my daughter, because at the time I was writing the stories, my daughter was like, around that same age and stuff. So that kind of helped me create her voice, because it was right there in my house. Yeah, that's where Amber came from. Amber was basically based on that. And it's been interesting because it's done very well around the world. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting to me why people from different cultures like it. And the feedback has been very interesting, from African-American perspective, from a Nigerian perspective, from a Malawian perspective. I've had these different perspectives from it, and it's all been great, but it's always, interesting why people like this particular story and why. And of course, the cover is amazing. James Eugene did a great job on it. It's actually gone viral.
It is. It's a beautiful cover.
Yeah, the cover's gone viral. I've seen all different kind of sayings and stuff attached to it. But it's a great book.
All right, wonderful. Now I'm going to jump to Terminus because I really enjoyed Terminus. And for me, it doesn't fit in like cyberpunk or steampunk or anything like that. Just magic. In a sense, yeah. or supernatural, whatever. What made you decide? Well, I probably know this answer, but what made you decide ATL?
Hey, AT aliens.
Yeah.
we actually have a group of authors in Atlanta. We all up until COVID, we would meet like once a month. And all of us used to be active, or were all active on the State of Black Science Fiction. And so we wanted to get together locally and work with each other, support each other as far as art and stuff like that, and writing. And one of the things that we wanted to do, we didn't just want to be a group that sat around and just talked about the stuff. We wanted to, create things. And so the whole idea of doing Terminus and doing urban fantasy. And again, it's a situation where you got something called urban fantasy, where the word urban is usually connotated to mean the city and, Black culture. Yeah. And most of the people that write urban fantasy at the time did not really include a lot of Black people in it. Mm-hmm. So we said, let's do some real urban fantasy. Let's, let's get together and we write some urban fantasy and let's base it in Atlanta because that's where we are and that's where we're from. So, so that's where that came from, Balagoon and Marcus Hayes and Violet Meir, all of us got there and we all got together and everybody sent their stories in, Aziza Sphinx, and it turned out really well. I mean, we had a really broad perspective of what, people thought of as being, urban fantasy, my story is more like a noir type story and stuff. And then you got Marcus Hayes' story, which really incorporates the different parts of Atlanta and stuff like, and that's what's really cool about it to us. We wrote this for Atlanta readers, basically. We wanted them to be able to look into this book and see places that they were familiar with and see all this supernatural stuff happening in those places and stuff. And also, I mean, from the marketing standpoint, we wanted this to be kind of a souvenir book. Like if you were visiting Atlanta and you wanted to bring something back, you say, hey, here's a book here about urban fantasy in Atlanta, that kind of stuff, So yeah, it's great, but we're actually working on a Terminus 2 as well. So
good.
Yeah, hopefully that one, we're gonna expand that one a little bit. It's not just gonna be focused on urban fantasy. We're gonna have stories from all the different genres. It could be urban fantasy, science fiction, steampunk, whatever you want to do, as long as it takes place in that Atlanta area and stuff.
Right. That's really cool. I used to live in Atlanta also. So, it's cool, recognize some areas. And maybe every Black person has lived in Atlanta at some
6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Either you live there or you got relatives living there.
It's like you live there or you live in DC.
There you go.
Those are 2 places. Blacktastic. Okay, so this anthology, I really, it was very rich and very educational, actually, in being able to see more Black writers. Why do you feel, what is the reason why you wrote this or edited this? And why do you feel it's so important for us to have an anthology like this?
Well, Blacktastic was basically the I guess the literary reflection of our convention that we had that year, the Blacktasticon. And all of the authors that have stories that contributed stories to that anthology were authors who were actually at the con and participated in the con. And it was basically just a book to highlight them and honor them and expose people to their work. Again, another book with great artists in there, great authors in there. You got Linda Addison, Cherie Thomas, Kanisha Williams. You got some really great authors in there and stuff. And it was basically something to bring attention to that, because that's what Blacktasticon is all about. Is bringing authors together, bringing Black creatives together, and putting them in an environment where it's a safe environment, it's a supportive environment. And we were able to, exchange ideals and educate each other, talk about things that other people didn't probably know about and learn about. Even the cover art. The cover art is by a brother named Junior Tomlin, and Junior is from London. And Junior is very well known in London and England as being a rave artist. And he's been doing this artwork for like 30 years. And I met him online and we were talking and stuff. And I was like, man, Junior, your art is great. Can we use some of your artwork for the cover of the book? And he said, yeah, and he let us use this particular artwork here. And so again, it was a matter of, exposing people to creators that they might not normally know in other parts of the world, part of the African diaspora that are doing the same thing that we're doing. And it's something that we hope to continue to do, because there's really a big movement of sword and soul and steampunk in Brazil right now.
Oh, wow.
And I've been really trying to work with some of the authors there so I can get some of them and publish them in some of my work and stuff, So it's so much stuff going on, and Blacktastic is kind of an example of what's going on and bringing that to people to learn about and understand.
Okay, cool. You've mentioned a few times cons, and I remember your con. I think it was the first year. I can't remember the name of the con.
Yeah, that was the State of Black Science Fiction Con.
State of Black Science Fiction Con, and so Kenya and I went to that. What's your feeling when it comes to doing a con that's focused so much on, you know, a particular group. And how did you feel about that con?
Well, you know, we've done a number of cons before then, and I'm not the first person to bring it up, and other people talk about it too. You know, a lot of times as a Black person participating in conventions and in the genre, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. You know, you are in an environment that you know that you want to be in as far as the subject matters and stuff, but you know the world is the way it is, and you're still exposed to some of the things, some of the racism and stuff like that that you would be exposed to outside of that convention. You would think that people who are open-minded about science fiction and fantasy would be open-minded about everything else, but you know, as we know, that's not necessarily the case. And so the whole object of having a Solstice Con and having a Blacktastic Con was to create an environment where, you know, Black creatives and Black people who enjoy these genres can come in and do it in a stress-free environment. You know, didn't have to worry about, you can come and cosplay any way you want to cosplay and not worry about somebody saying, you know, okay, you can't have a black Batman and stuff like that, you know, because you're with Black people, so you can be whatever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. The interesting thing about both cons is that we had a lot of people who were cosplaying, and they were doing their own cosplay. They were doing cosplay that had nothing to do with any particular popular thing. They were just like, I'm going to do a steampunk cosplay, and it's just going to be me doing steampunk. I'm not trying to be anybody, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's how I am. I don't pick characters. I just like, you know, genres. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was cool. That was really cool about it. And we even had some people who said it was kind of like going to a family reunion. They felt really relaxed and being able to communicate and talk about things and being in an environment where they felt no pressure. And I think it's really important for us as Black people to have those kind of places. I mean, the world is opening up. People are getting more open about it, but we're still in that situation where these kind of places are still needed, to where we can go and express ourselves and not be restricted by what people think we should be talking about and how we should be talking about it. Yeah. And even when even as a publisher, when I receive people's stories, I'm not trying to make your story conform to my audience. I'm basically trying to help you express your ideals in the best way that you want to express them. You know, and that's what I feel like my role is as an editor. It's not to say, you know, if you're going to write, you know, genres have certain rules and stuff like that. But I'm like, if you're going to write this story, you know, tell your story. You know, don't worry about if you're telling the story the way I want you to tell it. You know, tell your story, and let's help you tell your story the best way that you like that you can tell it.
And that's a good segue too, because I wanted to bring up MV Media. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Okay.
MV Media is a totally selfish endeavor to promote my work. When I started writing, because I've been playing with writing for years. Actually, right after I finished college, I had an English instructor, Anna Holloway, who's actually one of my Facebook friends now, who, as I was a chemistry major, noticed that I had a talent to write and encouraged that by exposing me to science fiction and fantasy and asking me to write stuff. So I kind of like give her the credit or the blame for me being an author today. So, when I finally got to the point that I wanted to write and I really studied the industry, I felt like the kind of stuff that I was writing would not really be accepted by publishers and editors based on what they were looking for. And at the same time, when I was starting to do this, print on demand and self-publishing was becoming very popular, especially in the urban lit, street lit genres. There were a lot of Black people writing stories in those areas, and then they were independently publishing, and they were doing very well. And I had had my own business years before. So those three things kind of came together. And that's when I decided I want to have my own publishing company, because that way I can, publish my books exactly the way I want to publish them. I can get them out to the audience exactly the way I want them to read them. And I would never, ever have to worry about getting rejected because, because everything I write is going to be published. And so that was the whole force behind it. And then as I started doing it, thought about other authors and said, this would also be a good outlet for other authors who want to do the same thing, who want to get their stories to the audience a certain way. That I'm a one-man show, so I can't, have big acceptance, submission things and stuff like that. But I always wanted to have a certain amount of my stories or my novels that I publish be by other authors, and I was kind of slow on that in the beginning, but this year I'm really starting to pick the pace up on bringing in new authors and publishing new books by different authors and stuff like that. But that's basically what MV Media is. We're basically here to support, authors of African diaspora descent and really get them out there into the audience the way that they want to have them out there.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm getting ready to blow your horn, So you don't toot their own horn. I'm going to toot your horn. And so I have some quotes here from reviews that are just so wonderful. Is it Meiji?
Yeah, Meiji.
Meiji. So this is about Meiji Book 1, the first book. A powerful novel packed with human drama and pulse-pounding action that vividly recreates the glorious kingdoms of long ago Africa. It's on par with many Pulitzer Prize-winning novels such as The Color Purple. So that's some awesome feedback right there. And then about Amber, the next one's about Amber and the Hidden City. Amber and the Hidden City is a gem that should not be kept hidden. I thoroughly enjoyed this book for a variety of reasons. Davis crafted a tale that is intriguing as well as entertaining. What really impressed me was the mythology Davis created based on Africa. Readers did not need prior knowledge of African culture, terms, or lore. Davis created a world that could be easily accessed. I could see this made into a movie. Kudos to Davis for this marvelous tale, especially in a genre where people of color are overwhelmingly underrepresented. I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I did and spread the word. So, and I saw many. There were so many. I was like, let me just pick and choose. But there were so many positive reviews of your work. I see how you definitely are touching a lot of people with all of your different types of books. So.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I mean, humbling to see people enjoy your stuff and to talk to people about it and meet people that talk about it, because as authors, most of us are selfish. We write for ourselves, and my whole thing, I said, I'm writing books that I like, and I'm going to try to find people that like them as much as I do. And that's the whole thing, And it's always it's always nice to see stuff like this, and it's also makes you feel kind of awkward because it's but every time I read things like this, it does make you feel good, because it makes you feel like you did what you wanted to accomplish, and people got it and people enjoyed it, and as an author, to me, that's basically all you can ask for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Okay, so before I get to where people can find more information about you, I do have a segment of the interview that was inspired by, I don't know if you listen to For All Nerds podcast. It used to be called Fan Bros podcast, but they had a section on their podcast where they asked whoever they're interviewing questions, very, just for fun. And it is pick one or the other, basically. So this is just for us to get to know you a little bit more. It's not anything stressed out. You're not going to necessarily win anything. But I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and you could pick one or the other, or it might be a question where you just expound upon. So first question, are you Star Wars or Star Trek?
I am, if I have to choose, if I really have to choose. You
have to choose. You have to choose one.
I would say Star Wars.
Okay. All right. I'm on the other side, but okay. Are you DC or Marvel?
Ooh. That's tough because I'm not really a big comic book fan.
Oh.
But again, if I have to choose, it would be Marvel.
Okay. All right. classic horror or 80s, 90s slasher horror?
I'm old school. I'm classic horror. I'm, Vincent Price, that kind of stuff. That's what I grew up with. Fall of the House of Usher, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, me too. I love that too. But I love my slashers though, because I'm an 80s kid. So that's
I like that suspense stuff. What's around the corner, that kind of thing.
Right. If you could live in any universe, any fictional universe, this could be a universe you've created or a universe that has been created, by someone else. What universe would you like to live in and why?
Ooh. Ooh, I'm gonna have to be selfish on this one.
Okay.
I think I would probably really enjoy the Dark Universe. Mm-hmm. Because I really like that storyline. I really like, what's going on there. If it was choosing my own, if I had to choose somebody else's universe, that'd be really, I would probably like the Star Wars universe would be cool. As long as I didn't have to live in the place where the Mandalorian took place. Put me in the city, I don't need to be out there in the outskirts, bunch of people eat stuff that doesn't look great and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, now this is because you do both of these genres, steampunk or cyberpunk?
Ooh, wow, okay.
In terms of favorite.
I actually would prefer a cyberpunk world. Knowing what I know about Fredonia and the world I created there, I think that Fredonian environment would be a very cool world to live in. One of the backgrounds of one of the back things running in Fredonia is that it's also about what would a country look like that basically was really truly equality and allowed every type of person in their culture to excel. And to me, the answer would be, as I show Fredonia being in the 19th century, you would end up with a country that would be much more advanced than all the other countries around it, because the people who probably would have been able to contribute are actually able to contribute.
Right.
And I think that's why I think the Fredonian, I really, the first books of Fredonian books are just action adventure, but like as the new one that's about to come out, the Curious Cases of Martha Periwinkle, and some of the stories after that, I'm going to really start getting into the politics and the culture of Fredonia. And I think that part of the aspect of it is really going to start to come out. And I think once I get done with it, all of it, some of y'all will want to live in Fredonia too.
Cool. Okay, so I have a few, I'm going to make this PowerPoint accessible to, and also the video, but the PowerPoint accessible so that people can find you. But here I have your website, MV Media, also 2 articles that, and I think one is a podcast, but that were really good. They gave a lot of information. The 2018 Black History Month Author Appreciation of you, and Milton J. Davis, writer of Black Speculative Fiction, visits Madame Paris. Yeah, so Paris, Madame Paris.
Yep.
So I thought that, is there any other place that people could find out more about you or find your books?
Yeah, those are basically it. I am on Instagram at Obadoro. That's Obadoro. I'm also available on Twitter at the Griot, and that's Griot with a T.
Yes.
Because if you get Griot there's actually, NBC actually has a news outlet about Black information. That's the Griot, but without the T.
Oh, that's right. It does. Yeah.
And sometimes people get me mixed up with them, so I get tagged with their stuff. That's always kind of funny. And I'm also on Facebook as Milton Davis, so you can look me up on there as well. So but yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, well, I would like to open up the floor if anybody has any questions for Milton. Feel free to ask. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen here.
Okay.
Well, good morning to both of you. This is Karen. The K, it's just Karen. It's nice to see you again, Milton.
Hey.
Because I've been following you on Facebook and all your posts. So that library behind you, you did a list of recommended history books for people that if you're wanting to do the research. So have you updated your list? Because I always find the books that you find interesting to tell your stories just as interesting. And many of them I have actually purchased because I just find history fascinating. So I was just wondering, have you been how do you update your list? Have you been republishing your list of books? Because history is just constant.
Yeah, I haven't updated it lately. I've only added a few more books to that list. A lot of my research I've been getting lately has been on the internet. There's some, that's where I've been finding the most recent information, because there's a lot of, scholars that are always doing information and updating what we know about history in general. And I spent a lot of time looking for those articles and downloading them. And I've actually, because I'm old school, I like paper. So I'll download them, print them out, put them in notebooks. I got about 7 notebooks right now that's got articles that I found online that, have contributed. There is one book, and man, I wish I hadn't, just let my daughter borrow it. It's called Female Monarchs and Merchant Queens of Africa. And it's it's published in the Ohio Press, by the Ohio Press. And it's a really good book. Some of the information in the book I was familiar with, but some of it I wasn't, especially the whole section where she talks about the merchant queens. I didn't realize that whole network and culture existed in African cultures. And so much so that I'm working on a story collection by one of my characters. And I added a story that focuses on a merchant queen, because I was just so fascinated with that whole culture and stuff, so, but yeah, I actually need to update it, because there are a couple of books that I've picked up since then that's not on the list.
Cool. I look forward to you posting that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Milton?
Well, if they don't ask, I will.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So are you going to, I know your daughter's an author as well, but are you going to publish any more children's books? And I'm thinking a little bit younger, like I have great nieces and nephews in the range of 6 and 7 and 8. And their mind is totally out. The little girl is just, her hero is astronauts being out in space. And I don't see, or I haven't figured out how to get children's science fiction kind of book, but just for that age range. And when you came out with Amber, I was like, oh, Milton's going to start writing more children's books, but Milton hasn't written any more children's books.
Yeah, children's books are tough for me.
Okay.
One of my friends here owns a bookstore, a Nubian bookstore, Marcus Williams, and he'll tell me every time I come in his bookstore, he said, Milt, you need to write a children's book. I sell more children's books than anything. About half of his display is basically children's books. So much so that he actually just recently released his own children's books and stuff. And I said, yeah, Marcus, I'm gonna do it. But I just like Amber took a lot. It took a lot, because my mind is not usually in that place. But I have been thinking about it a lot. I have been when the idea comes up, I'll do it, but it's not my natural flow, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So it has to be in you so that it's not so much work. It's just creative. So I get that. But when I saw that, I said, oh, he has that side too. So, I get excited when you start creating things, because I love the way you collaborate with other authors to create something for everybody and give them that outlet and that conduit, being that conduit for them to have that outlet. So I think that's always been very awesome about you, especially when the first time I met you at Dragon Con, because I was like, oh, more Black authors, yes. So I appreciate your work and thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much, Milton. I mean, I feel like we're already friends, so but it was just wonderful to be able to interview you and to be able to get to know more about your writing and for you to be a part of this con. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
I hope that we have still one day of the con left. So if there's something that might be of interest to you, I hope you get a chance to check it out. And yeah.
I'll definitely do that. I definitely will.
Okay, wonderful. All right then. Well, thanks everybody for coming also. And we'll see you later.
Thank you. Bye.